Hey guys, Probo1701 here, and today we're going to talk about my least favorite story from each of the classic Doctors in Doctor Who. And I do say my least favorite, not necessarily my worst, because I do think these are different terms. I think of worst and best as more objective terms, at least as how I define them, and least favorite and favorite is more subjective terms. For example, I think the best post-regeneration story is probably the 11th Hour. Just objectively, I think it's probably the best post-regeneration story. However, my favorite post-regeneration story is Robot, as I've done a whole video on that. Just because there's a lot of things about Robot I like. It has certain points about it that I just really enjoy that make it my personal favorite post-regeneration story. But objectively, Power, Spearhead, and 11th Hour are all probably better, and maybe even more of them. Same thing with least favorite and worst. A story that's objectively the worst might not be my least favorite, as is the case with, like, say, Colin, because objectively his worst could be Twin Dilemma, but Twin Dilemma's not my least favorite. Now, I've seen all of Modern Who. I have not seen all of the classic Doctor Who. And I have a whole video series where I do a video on each Doctor talking about the stories I have seen and I haven't seen. I'm not going to recap all those here, but those videos do exist if you want to view those. You can find them down in my video section. So this will be me just going by the stories that I've seen. And first on the list with the first Doctor. I've only seen 7 of the first Doctor stories. But right away, there's one in there that's just glaringly bad, and that's the Gunfighters. I watched that not too long ago, and it's the first Doctor story I've seen that's just a qualified dud for me. I did not like the Gunfighters. That Ballad of Johnny Ringo's song was... Oh. I mean, if you take that out of the episode, it's more tolerable, but they play that song. Apparently, they were very proud of that song. I don't quite know why, but they were very proud of it. They play that song and that story more times than the 95 Mortal Kombat played the Mortal Kombat song in that movie. Which is a great song and a great movie, by the way. But yeah, I didn't like the Gunfighters. I thought the premise was silly. The British people trying to do Southern accents was, to most degrees, pretty bad. As someone who's from the South in the States, believe me, it's pretty bad. And, yeah, that Johnny Ringo song was just awful. So yeah, I didn't care for the Gunfighters. My least favorite Hartnell story that I've seen. Moving into the Troughton era, I'm going to say Fury from the Deep just on the animation, because there's just not really a bad Troughton story that I've seen. Keeping in mind, I've never seen Underwater Menace. It's not one that's really in a hurry on my list, we'll say that. But, yeah, Fury from the Deep, just from the animation. The story itself is great on paper. The little bit of surviving live action footage looks fantastic. It's just the poor job with the animation really holds it back, and I'm not going to really harp on that because I've mentioned it once or twice on my channel before that I don't really care for the Fury from the Deep's animation. So that's that one. Number 3 with the third Doctor, I'm going to say the Time Monster just because it's the one story of John's that I've started to watch that I couldn't finish. Might not be completely the Time Monster's fault. I was watching a bunch of Doctor Who on BritBox at the time. A friend of mine had a BritBox account then. My sinuses are really up tonight. I got on a sneezing fit a few minutes ago. And I guess after having just watched a few stories, the fact that the Time Monster just wasn't really grabbing me to begin with, I might have been on a little Doctor Who burnout. I'd watched a lot of it up to that point over the past week or so. So I watched either the first episode of the Time Monster or the first 2 episodes. I don't quite remember. I just remember being really uninterested in it. I knew it by reputation anyway, so I just kind of stopped watching it, figured I'd get back to it later, and then I kind of just never did. So it goes to the bottom because it's the only Pertwee story I've ever started to watch that I couldn't finish. It goes to the bottom just because of that. If I went by a story that I fully watched and couldn't, like a complete story, I would have said The Claws of Axos, because I don't really... It's the one story in Season 8 I just really couldn't get into. I mean, even the Daemons, which I've harped on, I still think is a pretty good story. I just have a few issues with. But the Claws of Axos is the one bad story of that season. So, for Tom Baker, got to be Power of Kroll. That's the one Tom Baker story I can't watch. And I've seen most of Tom Baker's run. There's only 3 of his stories I haven't seen: Creature from the Pit, Nightmare on Eden, and The Invisible Enemy. Of all of them, the only Tom Baker story I find unwatchable is Power of Kroll. Because even some of Tom's bad ones, Tom still makes them watchable. Like Horns of Nymon is awful, but Tom is so good in it that for me, Horns of Nymon is watchable just because I really like Tom in it, even though the rest of it's crap. But this one, even Tom can't save this one. And I hate saying it because it's a Robert Holmes script, and the script it's fine. The script I don't have any issues with. It's just the execution is so piss poor. The director who worked on it, who's also the guy who directed Underworld, is just not good at directing Who. And to be honest, it's a story they shouldn't even have attempted on that budget. The special effects they had to do, all the shots with the creature look awful. This is one of those times where you have to realize when you're approving these kind of stories, you have to realize we can't objectively do this well. I mean, it's gonna look bad, even by Classic Who standards, bad. And honestly, I just wish they'd done a different story because they didn't have the budget to do this one. And the director is just, Power of Kroll is just unwatchable. It's unwatchable. The Sixth Doctor, that's a little tricky. I mean, it's so easy to say Twin Dilemma, but that last watch through I did a Twin Dilemma, it actually had some good points. I did a review on Twin Dilemma recently, and I didn't dislike it as much as some people do. It had its problems, but it had some things I liked about it too. I'm going to say The Ultimate Foe, and I definitely like the first half of The Ultimate Foe better than the second half, and I don't hate the story. I just feel like the second half doesn't live up to the first half, but then again, it's pretty hard to live up to Robert Holmes. I think if Holmes could have finished the story and still probably changed the ending to have a happier ending, because I don't really care for that original ending Holmes wanted either. I agree with Jonathan Nathan Turner on changing that to a happier ending. I still think the story would have been better. Just right off the top of my head right now, again, my lists are very fluid. They change. I could do this list a month from now and it could be different. But for right now, The Ultimate Foe is on my least favorite, although there's still a lot of Collins. There's about 3 or 4 Collins stories I still haven't seen from season 22. Sylvester McCoy, Tom and the Ronnie. I mean, do I really have to explain why? It's pretty bad. The Ronnie trying to dress up as Mel is just comically silly for all the wrong reasons. That scene when he's looking at her and it superimposes Bonnie Langford's face over her is just creepy looking and weird. Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. I blame Tom and the Ronnie for the bad rep season 24 gets, because I have a feeling when people think of season 24, they're not really thinking of season 24. They're thinking of Tom and the Ronnie. They're like, oh yeah, that's the one with Tom and the Ronnie. But it's just Tom and the Ronnie. It's not like the whole season. Dragonfire's still in it, and Dragonfire's great. So yeah, those are, of all the classic Who's, those are my least favorite stories. So I would like to know what you think of my list. I would also like to know what your least favorite story from each classic Doctor is. Now, again, not necessarily the worst classic story, or the one you think is the worst, but the one that just happens to be your least favorite. Again, I don't like doing worst and best list as much, because those are more objective lists, and plenty of other YouTubers do those. I much prefer something like least favorite and favorite, simply because it's more subjective, and so I think opinions on them are going to vary more, which creates more discussion, which I always enjoy doing. I love creating discussion. I love having discussions down in the comments with you guys, and I like trying to come up with lists I just don't see a lot of other people doing. That's one of the things I like to do on this channel, is come up with stuff I don't see a lot of other people doing. It just creates different discussions instead of having discussions you probably already had on other channels. So let me know your least favorite story from each Classic Who Doctor down below. Other things to do: click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications so you never miss a video. I do a new video daily. I've also started a Patreon page, and for the entire month of May, all of my tier levels get access to a lot of stuff that only higher tier levels usually get access to, or the levels past the entry levels. I have a $2 level, a $5 level, a $10 level, a $15 level, and a $20 level. But right now, even if you join at the entry levels, the $2 level and the $5 level, you still get access to things like behind the scenes videos, blooper videos, polls to vote in. We recently I believe I should be finishing up my voting poll on which classic story I'll be watching next. I should have another poll going, if not by the time you see this, then very, very soon. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be yet, but check that out. If nothing else, just give it a look. I'm always looking forward to having more people join. I've still got a couple video requests to get in for people who have just joined. Everyone who joins at any tier level gets a free video request. I've had 2 people join recently. One of them wants me to do a video review on Horror of Fang Rock, and another one wants me to do a video review on the Sontaran Experiment. So those will be coming soon, that to look forward to. So there's a link to that down below to my Patreon. Check it out, give it a look, see if there's anything there that interests you. Most importantly though, stay safe out there, and thank you for watching.